What would you do if you were humiliated in front of dozens of people just for trying to make an honest living? This is the story of James Rodriguez, a street vendor from Queens who entered one of Manhattan's most prestigious office buildings with nothing but hope in his heart and a small cart of homemade sandwiches. What he encountered there was cruelty so shocking that it would have broken most people. But sometimes, the universe has a way of balancing the scales. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one behind the mahogany desk. They're the quiet observer in the corner, watching everything unfold. And when that observer happens to be one of the wealthiest men in the Middle East, well, that's when miracles happen. Before we dive into this incredible true story of dignity, prejudice, and ultimate justice, hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss how this David and Goliath story ends. Trust me, the ending will restore your faith in humanity. James Rodriguez had calloused hands that told the story of 1,000 honest days, each line and rough patch a testament to the years of hard work that had shaped his life. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., his alarm would pierce through the thin walls of his one-bedroom apartment in Astoria, Queens, a sound that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. While most of New York City slept, wrapped in the comfortable darkness of early morning, James was already moving through his tiny kitchen, like a chef in a 5-star restaurant, preparing fresh sandwiches that would feed the hungry souls of Manhattan. The ritual never changed. First, he would light the small gas burner under his cast-iron skillet, the same one his grandmother had given him when he first moved to America 20 years ago. The blue flame would dance beneath the metal, and soon the kitchen would fill with the comforting sounds of sizzling chicken, the meat browning perfectly as James seasoned it with a blend of spices that had been passed down through 3 generations of his family. The aroma of grilled chicken, fresh lettuce, ripe tomatoes, and his grandmother's secret sauce recipe would fill the cramped space, mixing with the sounds of his 8-year-old daughter Sophia, stirring in the next room. The secret sauce was James's pride and joy, a mixture of mayonnaise, garlic, lime juice, and a dozen other ingredients that he had never written down, only memorized. His grandmother, Abuela Rosa, had made him promise to never share the recipe with anyone outside the family. This sauce, she had told him in Spanish, her wrinkled hands guiding his as he mixed the ingredients, this sauce is our legacy. It will feed your family when nothing else can. Papi, you're up early again, Sophia would whisper, padding into the kitchen with her worn stuffed rabbit clutched tightly against her chest. The rabbit, named Esperanza, had been a gift from her mother before she died, and Sophia carried it everywhere like a talisman against the hardships of their world. Her innocent eyes, so much like her late mother Maria's, would watch as James carefully wrapped each sandwich in aluminum foil, his movements precise and loving, each fold of the foil done with the care of someone packaging precious gifts. These weren't just sandwiches to him. They were his daughter's future, her college fund, her chance at a life he never had. Each carefully prepared meal represented hope wrapped in aluminum foil, dreams seasoned with his grandmother's secret sauce. When James looked at those sandwiches, he saw Sophia's school supplies, her winter coat, the birthday cake he would buy her next month when she turned 9. He saw the possibility of a better tomorrow, built one sandwich at a time. Go back to sleep, mi amor, James would whisper back, kissing her forehead and inhaling the sweet scent of her hair, still warm from sleep. Papi has to work so you can have everything you deserve. Sophia never complained, never asked why their apartment was smaller than her friends', never questioned why they couldn't afford the newest toys or clothes that other children had. Even at 8 years old, she understood that their life was different from her classmates, and she had learned to find a kind of beautiful resilience in their simple existence. While other children talked about family vacations to Disney World and new video games, Sophia learned to find joy in the simple moments with her father. She treasured his stories of the interesting people he met on the streets, the way his weathered face would light up with genuine happiness when he counted their earnings at the end of each day, the pride in his voice when he talked about serving the best Cuban sandwich in all of Queens. She had learned that love wasn't measured in dollars or square footage, but in the gentle way her father braided her hair each morning before school, in the songs he sang to her in Spanish while he cooked, in the way he always saved the last bite of his own dinner for her, even when he was still hungry. The apartment they shared was small but clean, filled with the warmth that comes from a home where every possession has meaning and purpose. The walls were decorated with Sophia's drawings from school, colorful pictures of stick figures labeled Poppy and Me, that James had carefully framed with dollar store frames. On the kitchen table sat a small plant that Sophia tended to each day, a gift from her second-grade teacher who had noticed the girl's gentle way with living things. The living room contained a second-hand couch that James had reupholstered himself, working late into the night with YouTube tutorials to learn the skill, determined to give his daughter a comfortable place to do her homework. James had been selling food on the streets for 3 years, ever since his wife Maria died in a car accident that had torn their small family in half. Before that tragedy that divided his life into before and after, he had worked construction, his strong hands and back allowing him to contribute to the building of New York's skyline. But a workplace injury to his spine, caused by a falling beam that should have been secured properly, meant he could no longer lift heavy materials or work the long hours that construction demanded. The workers' compensation had barely covered Maria's medical bills, and after she died, James found himself alone with a 5-year-old daughter and a back that ached with every movement. Street vending became his lifeline, his way of staying afloat in a city that could drown you if you weren't careful and constantly swimming. His cart was small but spotless, a mobile testament to his pride and professionalism. He had decorated it with a small Puerto Rican flag that fluttered in the Manhattan breeze, and a laminated photo of Sophia that he kept taped to the inside of his umbrella, positioned so he could see her smile during even the longest, most difficult days. The cart had cost him his last 3 months of savings, but it represented independence, the ability to provide for his daughter without having to rely on anyone else's charity or pity. The regulars knew him well, and over the months and years they had become more than customers. They had become a kind of extended family, proof that community could exist even on the busy streets of Manhattan. There was Mrs. Chen from the laundromat who always ordered extra pickles and would slip James an additional $5 around the holidays, telling him it was for the little one. There was Michael, the taxi driver with the thick Brooklyn accent, who would park his yellow cab nearby just to buy James's famous Cuban sandwich and share stories about his own struggles raising 3 kids on a driver's income. There was Dr. Williams, the young resident from Mount Sinai Hospital who worked double shifts and survived on James's food, often falling asleep standing up as she waited for her order, exhaustion written in every line of her face. These people saw beyond the weathered cart and the simple clothes. They saw a man with dignity, working hard to provide for his family, and they treated him with the respect that his character deserved. They knew his story, knew about Sophia, knew about the long hours and the dreams he harbored for a better future. But that warmth and acceptance existed on the streets, among the working people of New York. Inside the gleaming towers of corporate Manhattan, things were different. Inside those marble and glass monuments to wealth, different rules applied and different values determined who mattered and who didn't. On this particular Tuesday morning in October, with autumn painting Central Park in shades of gold and red, James received a call that would change everything. The phone rang just as he was finishing the last of the morning sandwich preparation, the sound cutting through the quiet of his kitchen like a bell announcing possibility. It was from Mr. Thompson, a kind businessman who had been buying lunch from James for over a year, a man who always asked about Sophia's progress in school and remembered her birthday. Thompson worked at Meridian Financial, one of those glass and steel monuments to wealth that pierced the Manhattan skyline like crystal spears, reaching toward heaven with the confidence that only money could buy. "James, listen." Thompson's voice was excited through the phone, carrying an energy that made James immediately pay attention. "We're having a big conference today, lots of important clients flying in from overseas. I've been talking you up to my colleagues for months, telling them about your incredible food. I finally convinced my boss to let you cater the lunch break. It could be huge for your business, man. We're talking about feeding 50 people, maybe more. This could be your break, the opportunity you've been working toward." James felt his heart race, the rhythm quickening as the implications of Thompson's words sank in. 50 people. That was more than he usually sold in an entire day, more money than he typically made in a week. It could mean Sophia's school supplies for the next 6 months, maybe even a small birthday party for her upcoming 9th birthday, the kind of celebration she deserved, but he had never been able to afford. It could mean winter clothes that weren't from the thrift store, maybe even a few toys under the Christmas tree this year. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. This means everything to me, to Sophia. I won't let you down, I promise you that. Just bring your A game, buddy. Some of these clients are pretty particular. They're used to fancy restaurants and five-star service. But your food is incredible, and I know you'll do great. Just come to the 47th floor, Meridian Financial. Ask for the Platinum Conference Room, and James, dress nicely. These people notice everything. James spent the rest of the morning preparing like never before, moving through his kitchen with the intensity of a chef, preparing for the most important meal of his career. He made extra sandwiches, ensuring each one was perfect, checking and double-checking every ingredient. The chicken was grilled to golden perfection. The vegetables were crisp and fresh, and each sandwich was constructed with the precision of an architect building a monument. He cleaned his cart until it gleamed under the apartment's fluorescent lights, polishing every surface until he could see his reflection in the metal. He pressed his only button-down shirt, the white cotton one that Maria had bought him for their last anniversary, and even splurged on a small bouquet of flowers for Sophia's teacher as a thank you for watching her after school. This was his shot, his chance to prove that a street vendor could serve the same quality food as any fancy catering company in Manhattan. This was his opportunity to show that dignity and skill weren't determined by the size of your business or the location of your kitchen, but by the love and care you put into your work. As he loaded his cart with the carefully prepared food, James whispered a small prayer, asking Maria to watch over him, to give him strength for what lay ahead. The journey to Manhattan felt different that day. Usually, James took the subway with his cart, navigating the crowded platforms and narrow turnstiles with the practiced ease of someone who had made this trip 1,000 times. But today, every step felt weighted with possibility. The other passengers on the train seemed to look at him differently, or maybe he was just more aware of their glances, more conscious of how he appeared to the world. He straightened his shoulders, held his head high, and reminded himself that he had every right to be there, every right to pursue this opportunity. The Meridian Financial Building rose before him like a monument to everything he wasn't, everything he had never been allowed to be. Its glass facade reflected the October sky, turning the structure into a mirror that seemed to show not just clouds and blue sky, but possibilities and dreams. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and gold, a space designed to intimidate and impress, to remind visitors that they were in the presence of serious money and serious power. James had never been inside a building like this. The ceiling soared 30 feet above, adorned with crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than he made in a year, their light casting rainbow prisms across the polished marble floor. Well-dressed people moved through the space with the confident stride of those who belonged, their heels clicking against the polished floor in a rhythm that spoke of power and importance. Their clothes were pressed and expensive, their jewelry caught the light from the chandeliers, and their conversations were filled with terms like portfolio and equity and market cap. These were people who lived in a different world from James, a world where money solved problems rather than created them, where opportunity was expected rather than desperately hoped for. James pushed his cart through the revolving door, the wheels squeaking slightly on the pristine marble, a sound that seemed amplified in the vast space. The squeak echoed off the high ceiling and marble walls, and he noticed several people turn to look, their expressions shifting from casual indifference to curious surprise. Their faces showed the kind of polite confusion that comes when something unexpected appears in a carefully controlled environment. It was as if his presence had somehow disrupted the carefully orchestrated symphony of their morning routine, like a street musician playing in a concert hall. The reception desk dominated the far end of the lobby, a curved marble masterpiece that looked like it had been carved from a single enormous stone. Behind it sat a young woman who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine, her every feature seemingly designed to project an image of polished perfection. Jessica Hampton was her name, though James wouldn't learn that until later. She was in her mid-20s with perfectly styled blonde hair that moved like silk when she turned her head, and makeup that probably took an hour to apply each morning. Her designer suit, a charcoal gray that probably cost more than James made in a month, hugged her slim figure perfectly, and her manicured nails, painted in a subtle shade of rose, tapped impatiently against her computer keyboard as she noticed James approaching. Jessica had worked at Meridian Financial for 2 years, ever since graduating from a prestigious university with a degree in communications that she barely used in her daily work. Her job description was simple: look beautiful, answer phones with the perfect combination of professionalism and warmth, and make sure the right people got access to the right floors. But more than that, she had come to see herself as something grander than a mere receptionist. She was a guardian of exclusivity, a gatekeeper who determined who belonged in this world of marble and mahogany and who didn't. She took pride in her ability to distinguish between those who deserved to be there and those who were simply trying to gain access to a world that wasn't meant for them. In Jessica's mind, the lobby of Meridian Financial was sacred space, a carefully curated environment where every element, from the crystal chandeliers to the imported marble to the fresh flowers that were replaced twice weekly, contributed to an atmosphere of refined elegance. The people who belonged here understood this, respected it, contributed to it with their own polished appearance and sophisticated demeanor. They were part of the symphony, instruments playing in harmony to create the perfect melody of success and refinement. As James wheeled his cart closer, Jessica's perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed in disgust, her expression shifting from neutral professionalism to barely concealed revulsion. She had dealt with delivery people before, of course, but they usually came through the service entrance in the basement, using the freight elevators and staying well away from the areas where clients and investors might see them. They certainly didn't wheel food carts through the main lobby where million-dollar deals were discussed and international partnerships were forged. This was unprecedented, and Jessica Hampton did not like unprecedented. In her carefully ordered world, everything had its place, and a street vendor with a squeaky cart definitely did not belong in the marble cathedral of Meridian Financial's main lobby. Her mind immediately jumped to the worst possible scenarios. What if potential clients saw this? What if the senior partners upstairs noticed that she had allowed some random street person to wheel a cart through their pristine lobby? What if this somehow reflected poorly on her judgment, her ability to maintain the standards that Meridian Financial expected? Jessica had worked too hard to build her reputation as the perfect gatekeeper to let some confused delivery person ruin everything. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, each word precisely enunciated with the kind of practiced disdain that comes from years of looking down on people. "What do you think you're doing?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, and James felt the weight of every eye in the lobby turning toward him. The confident conversations around him quieted, and he could sense that he had become the center of unwanted attention. But he had practiced this moment in his head during the subway ride over, had rehearsed how he would introduce himself professionally and explain about the catering order. He had imagined walking into that lobby with confidence, being treated with the same respect that any other caterer would receive. James looked up, his brown eyes meeting her cold blue ones, and tried to project the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing he belonged there, knowing he had a legitimate reason for being in that space. "Good morning, miss. My name is James Rodriguez. I have a catering order for the Platinum Conference Room on the 47th floor. Mr. Thompson from Meridian Financial called me this morning and asked me to provide lunch for a conference. I have all the details right here." Jessica's laugh was like ice breaking, a sound that had no warmth or humor in it. It echoed through the lobby like a bell-tolling judgment, causing several people to turn and stare with the kind of fascination that comes from witnessing someone else's humiliation. "You? Catering?" She looked James up and down with the systematic thoroughness of a customs inspector, taking in his pressed but clearly second-hand shirt, his worn jeans that had been mended at the knees, his weathered hands gripping the cart handle, his shoes that were clean but showed the wear of someone who spent long hours on his feet. Every detail of his appearance was catalogued and found wanting. "I think there's been some kind of mistake, a very serious mistake." "No mistake, miss. I have the order right here." James reached into his pocket and pulled out a wrinkled piece of paper where he had written down all the details of his conversation with Thompson. His handwriting was careful, but simple, the kind learned by someone who had left school early to work, who had learned to write by filling out job applications and signing rental agreements rather than writing essays about literature. The paper itself told a story of careful poverty, reused and folded, the kind of scrap that someone saves because new notebooks cost money that could be better spent on groceries. Jessica didn't even glance at the paper. Instead, she picked up her phone with a flourish that was part theater, part genuine disgust, and dialed an extension that would summon security to deal with what she clearly saw as an intruder. Security? We have a situation in the main lobby. Some kind of street person with a food cart claiming he has a catering order. She paused, her eyes never leaving James's face, watching for his reaction to her deliberate insult. Yes, I know. It's ridiculous. Can you send someone down immediately? James felt heat rise in his cheeks, a burning sensation that spread across his face like fire. Around him the lobby had grown quiet, as if someone had turned down the volume on the entire world. Conversations had stopped mid-sentence, and dozens of eyes were now focused on the scene unfolding at the reception desk, watching with the kind of morbid fascination that people have for accidents and disasters. He could feel their judgment like a weight on his shoulders, could see the mixture of pity and disgust in their expressions, could almost hear their thoughts. What is someone like that doing here? How did security let him get this far? These were people who lived in a different world, where poverty was something they saw on the news or glimpsed through car windows, not something that stood before them asking for basic human dignity. They were the kind of people who donated to charity galas but crossed the street to avoid homeless veterans, who wrote checks to food banks but had never missed a meal themselves. To them, James wasn't a person with dreams and struggles and a daughter who needed school supplies. He was an inconvenience, a disruption to their carefully ordered world. "Miss, please," James said, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest like acid. He could feel his hands shaking slightly, and he gripped the cart handle tighter to stop the trembling. "I just need you to call Mr. Thompson. He can verify everything. I've been preparing for this all morning. People are expecting their lunch. My daughter, she's so proud that her papi got this opportunity. Please just make one phone call." But Jessica was beyond listening now, caught up in her own performance of righteous indignation. She had an audience, and she was determined to show them all how effectively she could protect their sacred space from unwanted intrusion. "People like you don't cater events like this," she snapped, her voice rising with each word, echoing off the marble walls like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "Do you have any idea where you are? This is Meridian Financial, not some corner bodega or food truck gathering. Our clients are millionaires, investors, international businessmen who fly here in private jets. They don't eat whatever that is you're selling from your little street cart." Her words cut through the lobby like knives, each one designed to diminish and humiliate. The gathered crowd of onlookers seemed to lean in closer, some nodding in agreement with Jessica's assessment, others pulling out their phones to record what was surely about to become their entertainment for the day. James could see the small screens lighting up, could imagine his humiliation being shared on social media, becoming a viral video about entitled people trying to get into places they don't belong. A man in a $1,000 suit with silver cufflinks shook his head and muttered something about "these people" to his companion, a woman whose handbag probably cost more than James made in 3 months. A group of young professionals in their perfectly pressed business attire actually laughed, covering their mouths with their hands as if James couldn't see their amusement, as if his pain was somehow entertaining rather than heartbreaking. But in the corner of the lobby, near a cluster of leather chairs where visitors waited for meetings, sat a man who was not laughing. He was perhaps 60 years old, with kind eyes that seemed to hold depths of wisdom and experience, and simple clothes that might have come from any department store. His hair was graying at the temples in a way that suggested dignity rather than age, and he wore no jewelry except for a simple watch that looked practical rather than expensive. To anyone looking casually, he appeared to be just another businessman waiting for an appointment, perhaps someone's accountant or a mid-level manager from a smaller firm. But Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashid was anything but ordinary. Behind that calm exterior and those humble clothes was a man whose decisions affected thousands of lives across 3 continents. He had built an empire that spanned from the oil fields of the Middle East to the tech corridors of Silicon Valley, from renewable energy projects in Africa to real estate developments in Europe. His investments had created jobs for tens of thousands. His charitable foundations had built schools and hospitals and clean water systems in dozens of countries. He owned companies that most people used every day without ever knowing his name, controlled supply chains that touched nearly every aspect of modern life. But success had not hardened his heart. If anything, wealth had taught him the true value of human dignity. had shown him how cruel the world could be to those who had less, how quickly society could turn its back on people who didn't fit the accepted mold of success. He had grown up poor in a small village where dignity was measured not by the size of your bank account, but by the way you treated your neighbors, where the richest man was often the one who shared the most with others. He remembered his own father, a simple shopkeeper who had taught him that true wealth came from kindness, that real power was found in lifting others up rather than putting them down. Those lessons had guided every business decision he had ever made, every investment choice, every charitable donation. They had made him one of the most respected business leaders in the world, not just for his financial acumen, but for his ethical standards and his commitment to human dignity. He had arrived early for his meeting with Meridian's senior partners, a potential investment that could bring hundreds of millions of dollars to the firm, a partnership that could transform both companies and create thousands of new jobs. The meeting was important, the kind of opportunity that most firms would kill for. But now, watching this scene unfold, he found himself far more interested in the character being displayed in the lobby than in any financial prospectus he might review upstairs. Jessica's voice cut through the lobby like a blade, sharp and unforgiving. Security is on their way to escort you out. And let me give you some free advice. Next time you want to pretend you belong somewhere like this, maybe invest in some decent clothes and a real business. Food carts are for street corners, not corporate buildings. This is a place for serious people doing serious business, not for whatever it is you think you're doing. James felt something break inside him. Not his spirit exactly, but his faith in the basic decency of people, his belief that hard work and honesty would eventually be rewarded. He thought of Sophia, probably sitting in her after-school program right now telling her friends with shining eyes that her papi was catering a big important meeting for rich business people. He thought of all the hours he had spent preparing, all the hope he had invested in this moment, all the dreams he had built around this one opportunity. He thought about the story he would have to tell Sophia tonight, how he would explain that sometimes the world wasn't fair, that sometimes people judge you not by who you are, but by what you look like. He thought about the disappointment in her eyes, the way her face would fall when she realized that her papi's big break had turned into another reminder of their place in the world's hierarchy. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice carrying a dignity that transcended his circumstances. "I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not. I'm a working man trying to feed my daughter. Mr. Thompson believed in my food enough to give me this opportunity, trusted me enough to recommend me to his colleagues. All I'm asking is for you to make one phone call. One simple phone call to verify what I'm telling you. That's all. Just basic human decency." "I don't make phone calls for people like you," Jessica replied, her voice dripping with contempt so thick it seemed to hang in the air like fog. "People who belong here don't need to convince anyone they belong. They just do. It's obvious from the moment they walk in. You can always tell the difference between someone who has earned their place and someone who's just trying to fake their way in." The security guards arrived then, two large men in uniform who looked embarrassed to be part of this scene, their faces showing the discomfort of people who had been asked to do something that felt fundamentally wrong. They had dealt with actual threats, real security issues, dangerous individuals who posed genuine risks to the building and its occupants. Removing a food vendor who claimed to have a legitimate order felt different, felt like participating in something cruel rather than necessary. But Jessica was their superior in the building hierarchy, and questioning her judgment could cost them their jobs. "Ma'am," one of the guards said to Jessica, his voice uncertain, "maybe we should just call upstairs and verify the order before we do anything. It would only take a minute, and if he's telling the truth—" "I said remove him," Jessica interrupted, her voice sharp with authority and irritation. She wasn't about to let a security guard question her judgment in front of an audience, and make sure he understands he's not welcome back. Ever. We can't have people thinking they can just walk in here with any ridiculous story and expect to be taken seriously. As the guards approached, clearly reluctant but following orders, James felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. He turned to see the older man from the corner, the one who had been watching quietly throughout the entire ordeal. Up close, the Sheikh's eyes were even kinder, filled with a warmth that seemed to radiate genuine compassion and understanding. There was something in his gaze that spoke of experience with suffering, of a man who had seen enough of the world to recognize injustice when it stood before him. "Excuse me," the Sheikh said, his voice soft but carrying an authority that made everyone in the lobby stop and listen. There was something in his tone, a quiet confidence that commanded attention without demanding it, the kind of natural leadership that comes not from position, but from character. I couldn't help but overhear this conversation. "Young lady," he addressed Jessica, his words respectful but firm. "Are you absolutely certain this gentleman doesn't have a legitimate catering order?" Jessica's expression shifted slightly as she processed the interruption. The man's accent suggested wealth, education, international business, the kind of background that meant serious money and serious connections. His voice carried the subtle markers of someone who had dealt with heads of state and CEOs, someone who moved in circles where a single conversation could make or break careers. These were exactly the kind of people she was paid to treat well, the kind of clients who could complain to senior management if they felt disrespected. But she had gone too far down this path to back down now, had made too public a stand to retreat without losing face completely. Her reputation as the firm's gatekeeper was on the line, and she couldn't afford to look weak or indecisive in front of the gathered crowd. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but this is a security matter. This person is clearly trying to gain unauthorized access to our building with some fabricated story about catering. We have procedures for these situations, and I'm following them exactly as I've been trained." The Sheikh nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful, then turned to James with the kind of attention that made the street vendor feel truly seen for the first time since entering the building. "And you, sir? You mentioned Mr. Thompson. Could you tell me exactly what he told you when he called? Please take your time and give me all the details." James's voice was steady as he recounted the conversation, providing specifics that only someone who had actually spoken to Thompson could know. Details about the conference, the number of expected attendees, the specific location of the Platinum Conference Room, even Thompson's mention of particular dietary restrictions for some of the international clients. The Sheikh listened intently, occasionally nodding, his businessman's mind cataloging the information and recognizing the authenticity in James's account. Around them, the lobby remained silent, dozens of people hanging on every word of this unexpected drama that had transformed their routine morning into something much more significant. The gathered crowd could sense that something important was happening, that this was no longer just about a food vendor and a receptionist, but about something larger, something that spoke to fundamental questions of justice and human dignity. "I see," the Sheikh said when James finished, his voice carrying a note of certainty that made Jessica's confident expression begin to waver. "And you prepared all this food specifically for this event? You've invested your time and resources based on this conversation with Mr. Thompson?" "Yes, sir. I've been working since 4:30 this morning. My daughter, she's so proud. She told her friends at school that her poppy was catering for important business people, that maybe this could be the beginning of something bigger for our family." James's voice cracked slightly on the last words, the emotion breaking through his carefully maintained composure. The Sheikh turned back to Jessica, and something in his expression had changed. The kindness was still there, but underneath it was something else. Steel, authority, the quiet power of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to be heard, who had learned that true strength came from control rather than volume. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Miss," he said, "I believe you owe this gentleman an apology, and I believe you should make that phone call to Mr. Thompson immediately." Jessica's face flushed red, then began to drain of color as the implications of the situation began to dawn on her. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but I have authority in this building, and I'm not going to be told how to do my job by some random visitor who—" "Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashid," he said simply, the name falling into the lobby like a stone into still water, creating ripples that spread outward through the gathered crowd. "And I believe I have a meeting with your senior partners in about 20 minutes. A meeting about a rather substantial investment opportunity that could bring considerable business to this firm." The lobby fell so silent you could hear the fountain in the corner trickling, could hear the whisper of the air conditioning, could hear the collective intake of breath from dozens of people who suddenly realized they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple dispute about catering. Jessica's face went from red to white in the span of a heartbeat, the color draining from her features like water from a broken dam. Every person in that lobby knew that name, knew what it meant, knew the kind of power and influence it represented. The Sheikh's companies were legends in international business, his investments had transformed entire industries, and his name appeared regularly in the financial press as one of the most influential business leaders in the world. His charitable work was equally renowned. Schools and hospitals bearing his name dotted the landscape from Dubai to Detroit, and his commitment to sustainable development had made him a sought-after speaker at economic forums around the globe. When Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashid spoke, world leaders listened. When he invested in a company, its stock price soared. When he chose not to invest, firms struggled to find alternative funding. Jessica stammered, her confidence evaporating like morning mist in the face of this revelation. Her hands began to tremble slightly as the full implications of her behavior began to sink in. She had just humiliated a legitimate caterer in front of one of the most powerful men in international finance, had displayed exactly the kind of prejudice and poor judgment that could destroy not just her own career, but potentially damage the reputation of the entire firm. "The phone call, please," the Sheikh said gently, his voice carrying no anger or judgment, just a quiet insistence that the right thing be done. "To Mr. Thompson." With shaking hands, Jessica dialed Thompson's extension, her fingers fumbling with the numbers as if she had forgotten how to operate a telephone. The conversation was brief, her voice barely a whisper, as she asked Thompson about the catering order. When she hung up, she looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor, to sink through the earth and emerge somewhere far away from the scene of her professional destruction. "Mr. Thompson confirms the catering order," she said, her voice barely audible in the vast lobby. He's been waiting for Mr. Rodriguez to arrive. He says the conference has been delayed because they were waiting for lunch to be delivered." The Sheikh nodded and turned to the security guards, who looked relieved to finally receive instructions that aligned with their sense of right and wrong. "Gentlemen, I believe this man needs an escort to the 47th floor, not out of the building. His cart should be treated with the same respect you would show any other professional catering delivery. Perhaps one of you could help him navigate the elevators?" Then he turned to James, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears of relief and gratitude. The street vendor's hands were still shaking, but now, from emotion rather than fear, from the overwhelming realization that justice had prevailed, that dignity had been restored. "Mr. Rodriguez, I hope your event goes wonderfully. I've heard excellent things about your food from some mutual acquaintances in the business community. Sometimes the best meals come from the most unexpected kitchens, prepared by people who understand that food is not just sustenance, but an expression of love and care." As James was escorted to the elevator, the Sheikh remained in the lobby for a moment longer. He approached Jessica's desk one more time, his voice still gentle but his words carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. The gathered crowd continued to watch, understanding that they were witnessing a master class in leadership and human dignity. "Miss Hampton, I want you to understand something," he said, his tone that of a teacher rather than a prosecutor. "In my culture, we have a saying, judge a man not by his clothes, but by his character. The richest person in the room is often the one who treats others with the most kindness. Today, the richest person in this lobby was not wearing a designer suit. He was the man with calloused hands who gets up at 4:30 every morning to provide for his daughter, who takes pride in his work regardless of how others perceive it, who maintains his dignity even when faced with cruelty." Jessica's career at Meridian Financial ended that afternoon, though not in the dramatic fashion that movies might suggest. The Sheikh's investment worth over $200 million came with one condition: that the firm demonstrate the same values of dignity and respect in all their business dealings that he expected in his own companies. Jessica's treatment of James had revealed a character flaw that ran counter to everything the Sheikh valued in a business partner. When the senior partners reviewed the security footage of the morning's events, her termination was swift and final. But the story doesn't end with consequences and justice. It ends with transformation and hope. James's catering event was a tremendous success. The international clients were amazed by the quality and authenticity of his food, praising the fresh ingredients and the unique flavors that came from his grandmother's secret recipe. Word spread quickly through Manhattan's business community about the street vendor who could cater corporate events with the same excellence as any high-end restaurant. Within weeks, James was receiving calls from other firms, other conferences, other opportunities that he had never imagined possible. The Sheikh became not just a customer, but a mentor and friend. He taught James about business, about investing, about building something that could last beyond the next day's sales. More importantly, he showed him that success never requires you to lose your humanity, that wealth should be a tool for lifting others up rather than looking down on them. Under the Sheikh's guidance, James learned to expand his operation, to hire employees, to turn his single cart into something much larger. Within 6 months, James had opened his own small restaurant in Queens, a warm, welcoming place where the walls were decorated with Sophia's artwork, and the tables were filled with people from all walks of life. Sophia helped him serve customers on weekends, her bright smile and perfect manners charming everyone who walked through the door. The restaurant became more than just a business. It became a symbol of what was possible when talent met opportunity, when hard work was recognized and rewarded. 2 years later, Sofia Rodriguez stood at her elementary school graduation, the proudest student in her class. In the audience sat her father, James, no longer a street vendor but a successful restaurant owner whose story had inspired countless others. Next to him sat Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashid, who had become like a grandfather to Sophia, teaching her languages and telling her stories about the world beyond Queens, showing her that dreams could stretch as far as her imagination would allow. The Sheikh had kept his promise to invest in Meridian Financial, but only after significant changes were made to their corporate culture. The firm implemented new training programs focused on dignity and respect, hired a more diverse staff, and established a charitable foundation that provided microloans to small business owners like James. The lobby where Jessica had once held court was now adorned with photos of the entrepreneurs they had helped, including a prominent picture of James at the grand opening of his restaurant. Jessica Hampton, meanwhile, learned her own lessons about dignity and respect, though the learning came at a steep price. After losing her job, she struggled to find work in Manhattan's competitive business world. The story of her treatment of James had spread through social media and professional networks, and no reputable firm wanted to hire someone who had shown such cruelty to a working father trying to provide for his family. She eventually found employment at a small nonprofit organization that helped formerly homeless individuals find housing and employment. The work was humbling, and initially, Jessica resented having to start over at the bottom of the professional ladder. But slowly, day by day, interaction by interaction, she began to see the humanity in the people she served. She learned their stories, their struggles, their dreams, and gradually came to understand that dignity wasn't determined by designer clothes or expensive educations, but by the courage to keep trying in the face of adversity. One day, nearly a year after the incident at Meridian Financial, Jessica was surprised to see a familiar face walk into the nonprofit's offices. James Rodriguez entered with Sophia at his side, carrying a large box of sandwiches from his restaurant. He was there to discuss a partnership between his business and the nonprofit, a program to provide free meals to people transitioning from homelessness to stable housing. When Jessica saw him, she felt her face burn with shame, remembering the cruelty she had shown him that day in the lobby. But James approached her with kindness, extending his hand in greeting as if they were meeting for the first time. "I understand you work here now," he said quietly. "I think what you're doing is important. Everyone deserves a second chance." The conversation was brief, but in those few minutes, Jessica felt something shift inside her. She realized that James could have easily ignored her, could have requested to work with someone else, could have made her feel as small and insignificant as she had once made him feel. Instead, he had chosen grace, had demonstrated the kind of character that she was only beginning to understand. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is what it teaches us about the nature of true wealth and real power. The Sheikh, one of the richest men in the world, understood that real richness comes from how we treat those who have less than us, that genuine power lies in the ability to lift others up rather than tear them down. James, who started with nothing but determination and love for his daughter, discovered that dignity and hard work can open doors that seemed permanently closed. The next time you encounter someone who looks different from you, who seems to belong to a different world, remember this story. Remember that you never know who might be watching, who might be listening, who might be judging not the person being mistreated, but the person doing the mistreating. Remember that the quiet observer in the corner might be the most powerful person in the room, and that how you treat others when you think no one important is watching reveals more about your character than any resume or credential ever could. In a world that often seems divided by wealth and status, by the clothes we wear and the neighborhoods we live in, there are still moments when humanity shines through. When a sheikh sees a street vendor not as beneath him, but as a fellow human being deserving of respect. When a father's love for his daughter becomes the foundation for a business empire. When justice arrives not through courts or laws, but through the simple act of one person standing up for another. James Rodriguez taught us that dignity cannot be bought or sold, cannot be given or taken away by others. It lives inside us, in the choices we make, in the way we treat our families, in the pride we take in honest work. Jessica Hampton learned that cruelty always has consequences, that the universe has a way of balancing the scales, and that redemption is possible for those willing to do the hard work of becoming better people. And Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashid showed us all that true power lies not in the ability to humiliate others, but in the courage to lift them up, not in the wealth we accumulate, but in the wisdom we share, not in the businesses we build, but in the lives we touch along the way. The next time you see someone struggling, someone working hard to provide for their family, someone who might not look like they belong in your world, ask yourself, what would you do? Would you be the person who judges by appearances, or would you be the person who sees the dignity in every human being? Would you be Jessica, protecting your small corner of privilege, or would you be the sheikh, using your power to create justice? Because in the end, we're all just people trying to make it through this world with our humanity intact. And sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when we simply choose to treat each other with kindness. Sometimes a single act of compassion can change not just one life, but many. Sometimes standing up for what's right in a marble lobby can ripple outward to transform an entire community. The story of James Rodriguez reminds us that miracles don't always come from heaven. Sometimes they come from the quiet courage of one person who refuses to stay silent in the face of injustice. Sometimes they come from recognizing that the person being humiliated might be someone's father, someone's hero, someone whose dreams deserve the same respect as our own. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of human decency, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember to subscribe for more stories that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit over prejudice and hatred. Because in a world that can sometimes seem dark, these stories of light are more important than ever. They remind us that dignity is not a privilege to be earned but a right to be honored. They show us that real wealth is measured not in dollars but in the kindness we show to others. And they prove that sometimes, just sometimes, justice does prevail.